Ashamed and desperate. Those emotions are a dangerous recipe for a young Jedi. But the green-skinned Force user known as Minch couldn't help but give in to them. After all, it was only a short while earlier, aboard the Guild trading station that was only a few planets away, that Minch failed in his duties as a Jedi. In the cold steel corridors of the station, Minch discovered a Dark Jedi's apprentice and lost his very first duel against him. If it weren't for the sudden appearance of his friends, 4 other Jedi Knights who had joined him on his journey, Minch would have surely been cut to pieces by his opponent's crimson blade, and that very fact still weighed on his mind. Of course, Jedi shouldn't feel shame, nor should they seek glory. Minch knew that the emotions pulsing beneath his green skin were betraying him, but it didn't matter. He needed to prove his worth to his peers and to the Jedi Masters at the Temple of Coruscant. So when the Dark Jedi Master Abib-Fashi descended to Dagobah, Minch followed him. What happened next stained the world forever. This is Underrated Moments. "Stand down, Minch," a voice commanded over the comms. The green emerald-eyed Jedi instinctively reached for the controls on the dashboard of his tiny fighter to shoot back a reply. It had only been a few weeks prior that he and his friends had been piloting these starships on the other side of the galaxy, enjoying the warmth of the inner core as they continued their training. But the past few days had taken them on a wild journey into the Outer Rim, and now, staring at the storm-covered world beneath them, the Jedi were worried. Together, the 5 knights had managed to kill an evil Dark Jedi aboard a nearby Commerce Guild space station, and now they tracked down his master to Dagobah. But descending to the world with their tiny fighters was a tricky position. "We'll remain in orbit and wait for the Takara to arrive," Minch's Zabrak commander wisely decided. Still reeling from the shame of being saved earlier, Minch decided he couldn't wait. He wouldn't. He would try to take down the Dark Jedi on his own. "Too small, you think I am? Pursue I will. There is no fear, only courage." The lightning storms on the planet below emitted enough interference to cause Minch's words to echo with static. But even with the decreased audio quality, the other Jedi heard him loud and clear. They tried to change his mind, but they knew it was futile. As they waited patiently in high orbit, Minch pushed down on the starship's yoke and plunged through the upper atmosphere of Dagobah. But he would soon realize why his commander ordered him to stay above. After descending through the first layer of storm clouds, a long tendril-like bolt of lightning struck Minch's ship, disabling his aft thrusters. Desperate to keep him from crashing, he tugged on the controls, yanking them left, then right, but they didn't respond. He was in freefall. If there were any other terrestrial planets, Minch would have surely died, his body torn to bits and pieces as the thin metal plates of his Republic planet hopper crumpled on impact. But Dagobah was covered with swamps and deep pools of water. If the young Jedi could use the Force and push against the hull of the ship, he might be able to guide it safely into one of those. It was worth a shot, at least. Minch plunged his mind into the Force and hoped for the best. He wasn't quite sure he'd make it, but with a final strange shove on the starboard side, his vessel broke through the still water of a small, clear patch of water, free from the bone-like roots of nearby gnarl trees. "I've landed. My ship is in bad shape," Minch shyously told his fellow Jedi in space above as he held on to a small cylinder-shaped comm unit. Worried that their friend had bit off more than he could chew, they commanded him to wait aboard his starship and they'd come down to rescue him. But, just as he did before, Minch ignored them. He came to this planet for a reason: to hunt down the Dark Jedi Master once and for all. Using his senses as his guide, Minch leapt out of the swamp and onto firmer ground nearby. Small waves of fog and mist swept across the ground as if they were just another bizarre animal that called this planet home. As he looked at his surroundings, Minch once again worried whether or not he would succeed, or whether his friends would need to come to his rescue. A step further, and then a step further, Minch felt the disturbance in the Force pound in his head. Then, suddenly he saw it, a black shadowy figure draped in a dark cloak with a red lining. Eager to claim his glory, Minch leapt through the jungle chasing the Sith down. Even though he was far smaller than his prey, the net of gnarl tree branches managed to entangle Minch. Frustrated that the planet seemed to be holding him back, Minch shamelessly ignited his lightsaber and sliced through a series of limbs. When he broke through to the other side, Minch found himself at the mouth of a wide dark cave. Like any other cave, a cold gust of wind poured out from its opening. But Minch couldn't help but wonder if there was a reason that this cave was particularly chilling. "Surrender, you must. Your minions have fallen." "Failed you have," Minch said, projecting as much confidence as he could, given the terrifying situation he was in. "I think not. There are always more to be turned," the Dark Jedi replied before adding an extra threat to his words. "Perhaps you." Walking forward from the back of the cave, the Dark Jedi approached Minch. And now that the young Jedi finally got a better look at his opponent, he realized he felt more afraid than ever before. The Dark Jedi with his blue skin and black robe was a terrifying sight to behold. Could Minch actually win, even though he had lost to this man's apprentice only a short while ago? Minch tried to resist the negative thoughts that started to fill his mind. Using the Force to assist him, Minch leapt into the air and acrobatically flipped over the Dark Jedi Master, trying to finish the fight with one horizontal slash to his opponent's head. Foolish Jedi, as you see, size matters. Suddenly, the Bibfashi grew to 10 times his normal proportions. Even though Minch knew the power of the dark side was particularly useful for conjuring illusions, he couldn't help but feel tempted to cower in fear. But he resisted. Drawing his slender green blade behind his head, Minch struck through the trick, but was horrified by the result. Instead of a giant dark Jedi, 1,000 miniature ones now descended on Minch. You cannot win. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful, one of the tiny figures threatened, as they clambered up Minch's body. That was it. This was his end, Minch thought. He closed his eyes and swung his lightsaber like a madman, trying to hit any part of the Dark Jedi he could find. But it wasn't long before the thousands of black figures ascended his cloak and climbed all the way to his eyes. In shock, Minch fell unconscious, and a few moments later, with his back on the mist-covered cave floor, he woke. His green lightsaber had been disengaged and the silver cylinder laid lifeless on the ground before him. There was no sign of the tiny dark Jedi that had attacked him before, but in the corner of the cave, clenching a bleeding hole in his stomach, the Bibfashi master wheezed in pain. In his blind frenzy, Minch somehow managed to strike a killing blow. "Even if you strike me down," he said, suddenly far less menacing than he seemed before. "Now that I have defeated you, your mind is weak, open as a book, written with fear and anger." As Minch rose to his feet, he couldn't help but wonder how many more breaths the dark Jedi could draw. Each one sounded wetter than the previous, as his lungs filled with blood. So this was what victory felt like, Minch wondered, watching a person die, their blood leaking onto the cave floor like oil from a downed land speeder. Was a far different scene from the challenging duel he had just fought in. As he watched the Bibfashi Force user struggle to plug the bleeding hole in his gut, Minch felt sorrow. He couldn't quite make sense of it all, but he knew that something was wrong. The heroics and thrills of fighting had dire consequences for the loser. "You'll make a great addition to the Dark Jedi one day," the Dark Jedi said with a final agonizing gasp. And then Minch watched as the sorcery that had almost killed him fell against the floor of the cave and melted into the stone and mud. Little could the young Jedi know that in the centuries to come, this would be the same cave that Anakin Skywalker's son, Luke, would venture into. And it would be against the young Jedi apprentice that the Bibfashi master would have his final duel.